The war was supposed to end Iran's leverage. On paper, every indicator said so. 900 strikes in 12 hours, supreme leadership decapitated, air defense infrastructure erased before dawn. On paper, everything pointed one way. Reality didn't. 21 miles. That is the width of the Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest point. And right now, that is all that matters. Iran didn't survive Operation Epic Fury by matching American firepower. It survived by understanding something the strike planners appear to have underweighted. Geography is not a military asset you can bomb. You can destroy every missile battery on the Iranian coastline, and the coastline remains. The geography remains, and whoever controls the shore controls the passage. 3 months after the most intensive U.S. air campaign since Iraq, Iran still controls the shore. The Strait closed within hours of the February 28 strikes, not through a single decisive naval action, but through the systematic deployment of what analysts call the Mosquito Fleet. Hundreds of small, fast, expendable vessels operating across the world's most congested shipping lane. Layered on top, anti-ship missile positions along the Iranian coast and mines seeded through the northern approaches. No single element of that system is individually decisive. Combined, they make the cost of transiting the Strait too high to absorb at scale. 20% of the world's oil supply stopped. Within 48 hours, fuel prices began climbing. Within a week, shipping routes were rerouting around the Cape of Good Hope, adding weeks and thousands of dollars per voyage to every cargo container heading from the Gulf to Asia. Stock markets in Tokyo, Seoul, and Shanghai opened the following Monday to the worst session in 18 months. This is the part that was not in the war plan. The fastest way to pressure the United States is not to attack it militarily. It is to hold a geographic position that makes the global economy structurally dysfunctional until Washington concedes something. Iran understood this. Washington is still working out the response. The ceasefire came April 7th. But a ceasefire between two parties who cannot agree on what was negotiated is not a resolution. It is a pause with a timer attached. The United States presented a 15-point peace plan. Iran rejected it. Washington launched Project Freedom, naval escorts for commercial vessels through the contested waterway. Iran responded with renewed harassment operations. U.S. and Iranian forces exchanged fire in the Strait twice in early May. Neither exchange crossed what the Joint Chiefs defined as major combat operations. That threshold is the most important line in the current conflict, because both sides are reading it, and both sides are choosing very carefully not to cross it. Trump paused Project Freedom on May 5th, citing diplomatic progress. Iran's state media called it a retreat. The gap between those two characterizations is not semantic. It reflects a genuine disagreement about who holds leverage, and leverage in this phase of the conflict determines who moves first in negotiations. Then Beijing entered the equation. Trump's May 14th and 15th summit with Xi Jinping produced no signed agreements. Xi confirmed a return visit to the U.S. in the fall. Both leaders stated publicly that Iran should not acquire a nuclear weapon, neither committed to a mechanism for enforcing that position. Days before Trump landed in Beijing, Iran's foreign minister Arakchi flew to China for the first time since the war began. The timing was not coincidental. China has three simultaneous interests in this conflict. It wants Hormuz open because its economy depends on Gulf oil. It does not want a nuclear-armed Iran, creating regional instability. And it does not want the United States to emerge from this war with its deterrence credibility restored. Those three positions cannot all be satisfied. Xi has not resolved that contradiction. He has managed it, and in doing so converted it into leverage over both Washington and Tehran simultaneously. That is not neutrality. That is the most sophisticated diplomatic position currently being played on the board. Here is where the situation becomes structurally dangerous, in a way that outlasts this conflict. Before the war, the IAEA reported that Iran had stored highly enriched uranium in an underground facility that U.S. strikes in June 2025 had not reached. Since February 2026, Iran has denied inspectors access to every bombed facility, while providing limited access to unaffected sites. The IAEA cannot currently verify whether enrichment has been suspended. It cannot confirm stockpile status. The agency's own language is unambiguous. Normal safeguards have become, in Tehran's words, legally untenable. Iran says uranium enrichment is not currently on the negotiating table. Trump says the first line of Iran's latest proposal is unacceptable, that Tehran reversed a prior commitment to relinquish its enriched material. Two parties, one critical variable, directly contradictory accounts of what was agreed. Somewhere beneath that contradiction is a quantity of fissile material that no external actor can currently locate or verify. Kim Jong-un watched this unfold and told his party Congress that the Iran war proves North Korea made the right decision to keep its nuclear weapons. The logic holds. Iran fought a nuclear-capable superpower to a strategic standstill without nuclear weapons. But the lesson other states will draw is not that conventional resistance works. The lesson is that sovereign leverage of any kind is the only protection that ultimately matters. That lesson is now circulating in every capital that has ever run its own deterrence calculation. Operation Epic Fury is not free, and the accounting is only beginning. The USS Nimitz, scheduled for decommissioning in May 2026, has had its service life extended to March 2027, not by strategic choice, but because operational tempo left no alternative. The US has lost 16 MQ-9 Reaper drones since Epic Fury began. An Iranian drone struck an E-3 AWACS at Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia in late March, a platform the Air Force was already retiring, now degraded ahead of schedule. Individually, these are manageable losses. Collectively, they represent something the US military has not confronted in over 2 decades: sustained attrition against an adversary operating inside its own geography, with full knowledge of American response timelines. The deeper problem is not the assets lost. It is the assets committed. Every carrier strike group in the Middle East theater is a carrier strike group unavailable for a Taiwan contingency. The US military is not designed to run 2 major theater operations simultaneously at full intensity. Right now, it is running one at high intensity and relying on deterrence to hold the other. Xi told Trump that Taiwan was his most important issue during the Beijing summit. Trump said he wants the situation to stay the way it is. That is not an agreement. It is 2 leaders acknowledging an incompatibility and choosing for now to leave it unresolved. Beijing is watching every maintenance cycle, every inventory number, every extension of every asset that was supposed to rotate home. The global economy does not collapse with a single event. It compresses slowly at first, then in ways that are structurally difficult to reverse. The EIA's current base case projects that traffic through Hormuz will not return to pre-conflict levels until late 2026, meaning the risk premium in oil, LNG, and freight persist, even if military escalation eases. Shipping costs on Cape of Good Hope routes have surged. Fuel costs across parts of Asia are beginning to affect retail consumption, which flows into corporate earnings, which flows into equity valuations, which flows into credit markets. U.S. retail sales growth slowed in April. Bond yields are signaling inflation concern. The mechanism is direct. Higher energy costs raise input prices across every sector simultaneously, and there is no monetary policy instrument that resolves a supply-side shock originating from a geographic choke point that central banks cannot reopen. That is the variable Washington cannot fix from a desk. The deeper consequence is structural, not cyclical. The last 40 years of global commerce were built on a single assumption that the Strait of Hormuz would remain open because American military power guaranteed it. That assumption is now empirically in question for the first time since 1979. And once an assumption at that scale is questioned, the hedging begins. Alternative pipelines, alternative reserve currencies, alternative supply chains that do not route through a waterway. Any single regional power can close in 48 hours. Those alternatives take years to build. But the decision to build them does not wait for the Strait to reopen. It was made the morning the closure held. Iran has not won this war. Its supreme leader is dead. Significant military infrastructure has been destroyed. Its population is under blockade. Its nuclear program exists in a state of international legal ambiguity that benefits no one, including Tehran. But Iran has also achieved the one thing the strike planners needed it not to achieve. It demonstrated that a regional power operating inside its own geography can impose a cost on the global economy that forces a superpower to negotiate rather than dictate. That demonstration cannot be undestroyed. It already exists. Other actors have already absorbed it. The Strait will open eventually, under some arrangement, on some timeline, with some concessions that neither side will fully publicize, but the world on the other side of that arrangement will not be the one that existed on February 27th. The assumptions that held the global order together have already been tested. Some of them did not hold. The real question is not whether a deal gets done. Deals always get done, eventually. The question is what the next actor in the next crisis will have learned from watching this one, and whether the United States will have answered that question before they act on it. The window is not closing. It has already moved, and the next decision will be made inside whatever space remains.